Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Magazine podcast. I'm Chris Eggett, the editor of the magazine, and today we're joined by Ivan Brett to talk about folk games, games that you can play off-screen, in real life, wandering around, and we also get Ivan's top 5 games to play through Zoom. We also hear about the time that Ivan was nearly arrested in a Walmart. Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
This is Ivan Brett. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Ivan Brett. I'm an author and a teacher, and my main project at the moment is collecting up folk games and community games that you can play together in real life, generally off-screen. I've collected these up into 2 books, and that's been the last 3 or 4 years of my life, and it's completely changed the way I've seen the world, actually.
It's an interesting project. I think your first book was The Floor is Lava, is that
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And the next one coming up is called, is it board games exclamation mark?
Yeah, so I think it's quite fun to have a performative element to a title. So the official pronunciation is board games. And if you actually say the punctuation marks out loud, you lose 1 point in the book pronunciation game. I just quite like do your best. Let's hear your best shot at the title.
Board games?
Well, that's
No,
okay.
I'm not sure about that, actually.
I think you might have switched the punctuation up there. But I like it.
Actually.
That'll be the sequel to the sequel, maybe.
Yes. So I think we're going to talk today about sort of games in different contexts and sort of maybe like expanding what we think of games as. Obviously, at Tabletop Gaming, we mostly talk about games, war games, RPGs. So mostly what people do when they have a games evening of some kind is they'll sit down together, they'll get out a big box, it'll have lots of bits in it, they'll sit around it, and at the end, through some mystery of maths, they'll have decided one of them is a winner, and everyone will go sort of home happy and maybe aching from having to sit on a kitchen chair for slightly too long, that sort of thing. Yes, but I think your focus on folk games puts us in a new context for playing games, and makes us think about playing games slightly differently.
Yeah, I think so. I'm a sort of big tabletop RPG gamer, and I really enjoy so many elements of that. And I think that I say we because I imagine probably your listeners are the enlightened few who really know how to get the most out of those things and not feel embarrassed or inhibited by those things. But when we go out into the big wide world, despite the fact that we're not doing we said we wouldn't talk about the quarantine, but we're talking about it now. When we eventually go back into the big wide world, we will find ourselves surrounded by those people who are not quite so comfortable with play. And let's get that kind of like play versus games dichotomy out of the way, right? Games are what you do to play. Games are rule sets that allow you to play, but play is the actual action of doing that thing. And so the games that I most love, and I think the games that a lot of people most love, are ones that allow you to play. And yet, for some reason, when we're out in Sainsbury's or in the post office queue, we suddenly find ourselves inhibited. So yeah, folk games, when done right, allow you to be playful in scenarios when perhaps you would otherwise feel uncomfortable doing so.
And well, I think a lot of people, even board game people or war game people, anything like that. I mean, RPG people are obviously absolutely fine at this.
Glad to hear it.
They're basically exhibitionists, aren't they?
I believe we are. Yeah.
But there is a solid group of people who are they love games. They probably like to play RPGs, but getting into it is probably quite difficult, actually.
Yeah.
I think some of these folk games are kind of and the games you collect are probably a good way of getting into it.
Yes, I think so. I think if you imagine you're setting up a play space, by which I mean a set of rules that everyone understands, and then you just live within that and you engage within that, then it doesn't matter how complicated or simple the rules are. So what I'm trying to do is find games where the rules are very simple, but you're still doing that kind of improvisey, role-playing, and also kind of like position holding, which is very board gamey as well. I'm the arbiter and you're the guesser. I'm the judge and you're the liar. And so we're sort of, very simple stuff, but, Monkey Paw is one of the ones I'm thinking of right now. Couldn't be easier. I ask you for your perfect something. So I might say, I don't know, what's your ideal superpower?
See, I actually have an answer to this.
Good.
But it's my favourite, like, bad superpower.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
It's to know the name of any dog I see.
that is a great, great superpower.
Like, so you could always like in so in normal social situations, you'd be
Mm.
able to talk to the owner of the dog, knowing the dog's name.
Yeah.
And in sort of dangerous situations, you could be a hero because you could call that dog off, or stop it from jumping in the river or whatever it is that the dog wants to do.
Or you could steal the dog, of course, if it responded to its name.
I mean, you have uncovered my real motives.
Ah.
Um,
Well, so the
so,
way this game works is now I grant you that wish, but I stick the monkey paw in it. I make something that's going to make it unpleasant, and then we see if you still want it. So in this case, yes, you know every dog's name, but also you can hear every dog's thoughts. Um, like within maybe, let's say, 150 feet proximity.
wow.
Um,
I mean, is it affected like bad Wi-Fi? So
I think
does
if
it
you,
go like
sorry, go on.
does it go through bricks and mortar well, or
Yes, it transmits very, very well.
Okay.
It's almost blindingly loud, deafeningly loud, I suppose. Let's not mix senses here. And of course, dogs' thoughts are repetitive, irritating, and sometimes revealing about themselves. So would you still take the superpower?
No, I should have picked a better superpower if I was gonna. So I've lost this game, haven't I?
Well, you haven't lost it. You've made the choice. You have correctly chosen the right option. But now you might ask me what my perfect gig is, or my perfect breakfast, or whatever it's going to be, and then I'll give you my perfect thing. You ruin it, and then I still see if I want it. So we're playing roles. I'm occupying a kind of powerful genie, and you're just the sort of lowly wisher. And we'll swap it around, and meanwhile we'll be sort of, I don't know, walking down to the post office or whatever it is, and just allowing ourselves to be playful and engaging with ideas that aren't necessarily right in front of us. And I think the more we can do that with all sorts of people, be it cross-generational or cross-class or anything else, it opens up us to a greater range of interaction between people in the real world.
So why do you think people are resistant to the idea of play in this way?
I think play is thought of as frivolous, and I think it's also associated with juvenility. Juvenilia? No, juvenility, right? Being juvenile. We play when we're children, and then as soon as we hit the age of 12, every association I can think of where we use the word play is negative. Are you playing games, or are you playing around, or I'm not playing with you? These are all things that are negative. So we immediately think that being playful is being silly, or being playful is not getting to the point, or perhaps being playful is revealing that you're not enough of a grown-up. But I think that's nonsense. I really do. I think that play is, well, okay, there's a definition of play that I think is associated to a guy called David Gabre, but I've been looking for it for years. I heard it on a podcast with Brennan Lee Mulligan, the DM for Dimension 20. They do from College Humor, right? And he said he has attributed this to, I think, a guy called David Gabre, but I can't find who this person is. So that's part of my life's mission. He said play is the exuberant exploration of one's own abilities within a world, right? So the idea is that you're not being silly, you're exuberantly exploring your own limitations. You're kind of bouncing off the walls of what you can and can't do. And that's wonderful because you're allowing yourself a safe space in which to engage with skills and ways to interact. And then when you bring that out into the real world, you've practiced it already. That's amazing. If we can harness that power, if adults can be as willing to play as, well, if some adults can be as willing to play as other ones, perhaps we're all going to take ourselves a little bit less seriously and also be a little bit less scared of making mistakes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that idea there of sort of curing the fear of maybe the problem with my answer to our little game there of saying, "Oh, I've lost the game."
Yeah, right.
Maybe that's the problem there. That some people do approach it in that way. That there are people who wouldn't just take it as, "Oh, that was interesting that I didn't want this anymore."
Yeah. Oh, what does it mean that I've lost in this case? Does losing mean I get to circle back around and find a better way across that bridge that I've not managed to cross, or does losing actually means that I've just learned something and will never get to try again? Losing can be great.
Yeah, I think it's a valuable thing to be able to, well, at least to be able to accept occasionally.
Yeah.
Recently, and as you said before, we didn't necessarily want to talk about the subject
Yeah.
that's going on outside.
Yeah. It dates it, doesn't it? It dates it.
It doesn't. However, why do people want to play games right now?
I think it's I don't know, first of all, and I think it's a really interesting question. And if we found out, wouldn't that be great? Couldn't we, I wonder if it's to do with the fact that we are so lacking in interaction right now that when we do interact with people, we want it to be fun or be memorable or be new. And maybe there's an anxiety there too. We're all stuck at home and feeling worried and scared. And so we want something to make our time feel more special and more exciting. I had never played any of those brilliant Jackbox games before, what are they? Drawful and all those brilliant ones. And I got on a Zoom call with a bunch of friends and we played those for the first time. And these were friends I'd had for years, but I guess we didn't have anything to catch up on. That's the first thing. There was no small talk. We just got straight into it. And then having got straight into it, we had a brilliant time. It was fantastic. Everyone had a great evening. We didn't mention the subject except in the occasional punchline, and then we all went to bed separately. so it was, I don't know, maybe people just feel that the world is so serious right now, and we need excuses to get together and be with people, and that's what a good game can do. All the games you mentioned, sort of, collaborative, not necessarily collaborative, but multiplayer games. I don't know if the sales of single player games have gone up. They probably have, I don't know.
We've seen an interest in it, definitely, here. That people are looking for solo play a lot, and just which I guess is because often people who board gaming people don't necessarily live in board gaming families. They might play a little bit, but not to the extent that they'd play a big heavy Euro game with their friends, or their D&D group probably doesn't include everyone they live with,
Right.
Unless they live in some sort of D&D commune, which
That's pretty awesome.
so yeah, I mean, my personal experience is that me and my friends who don't usually play RPGs, for the most part, we've all got into suddenly playing a lot of weird OSR games, and so just because playing over the internet is possible,
Yeah.
suddenly having a structure for fun again with people you don't usually speak to is really valuable. Right?
I think it is, yeah.
The Tabletop Gaming Game Store is open and dispatching orders worldwide. Visit www.tabletopgaming.co.uk to read the reviews and buy the games directly from us.
So Ivan, do you want to take us through your top 5 games we can play over Zoom?
Yeah, I thought it might be quite useful to have some games that you could play remotely. And I think pretty much all of these are from my book. So, if you were after 100 of them, you could search it out. Some of them definitely won't work over Zoom or Skype. These are ones that definitely would. Let's start at number 5. This one's called Cat Eats Mouse. It's a one-upmanship game. So someone will give a small item, mouse, and the next, but you have to work out the order of play. First of all, but that's not too hard. The next person will give an item that beats that thing and a verb of how it does it. So cat eats mouse, and then it might be dog chases cat, and then it could be flea bites dog, and then it might be what kills a flea? Nothing kills a flea. Fleas are indestructible. Fire incinerates flea. What's great about this game is that the further you go, you realise there's never any end, because even if you have a black hole, someone can invent, I don't know, a massive cork that plugs the black hole. I mean, forget physics. We can just say it works in the game. A lot of fun. Nice to enjoy the silences of people thinking. So rather than it being a sort of reactive game, it's a responsive game. It can go on for hours and it's a lot of fun. Next one is a number 4 storytelling game called Fibber. You challenge another person on the call to start telling a story. Give them a prompt. My most embarrassing childhood memory, or the time I met my hero. And they start telling you a true story, entirely true story, except that at some point they're going to tell one lie, just one lie. When they get to the end of their story, everyone's got a chance to guess just once for the one lie. And the player, you get a point if you guess it right, and you get a point for everyone you fooled. Nice, because we're sharing stories, we're talking about ourselves, but also we're listening super carefully because we want to pick up that lie. And what's really cool about it as well is it's all about body language. So depending on how you sit when you're on Skype, and depending on how you watch when you're on Skype. You know, I tend to look at myself quite a lot on Skype, to be honest. So when I got on this call with you, I put my own face away. I don't know where that is. It's minimized somewhere. So I couldn't just stare at myself. And this game forces you to look at someone else, which is quite good.
Yeah, I quite like that one. People don't often take the chance to talk about themselves, do they? And it's just a nice little thing to encourage that kind of engagement.
Do you have a friend who's like the storyteller, the one who goes and does all those brilliant anecdotes? Because I do. And then when I have to tell an anecdote, I always have to think really hard. And I go, oh, I've got good stories. Like, these are great ones, but I never think of them. Like, I don't keep regaling them again and again and again. And you forget them, don't you? Because memory is just the reproduction of the past memory of that thing. So if you play this game enough, you're going to be that guy who's got all the good stories.
I've never finished a sentence in the way I intended to finish it at the start of the sentence. So as I get distracted, so that sounds like a pleasing exercise to suddenly become the stories guy. So we've got number 3.
3 is scat memory. Now, this is the kind of game you've got to play once people have warmed up with other games, but I love it. You get in the head of a scat singer, and it's a cumulative memory game. So one player adds a little scat note, bap, and then the second player says it and then adds another one, badu, and then the third one goes badu chua, and then the fourth one goes badu chua, bing, like that, and you keep adding on little elements to that scat phrase until someone forgets it, and then they lose. You can do eliminations, you can do punishments or forfeits, whatever you want. Best thing about it is, as soon as everyone's had one go round, no one's embarrassed anymore. You're all just having a really great scatty time. And what's better than a great scatty time?
Yeah, that sounds fabulous. Yeah, that does require a warm up. I don't think I'd go in cold with that one.
Definitely not. And actually, like, I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, but I have thought of a couple of things. I talked a little bit about the kind of the we's and the not we's of those who like to play and those who are sort of less. And you said there are people who maybe are now in isolation with their families who don't like games. I think having games that start to develop the breaking of inhibitions, whether it's role playing, whether it's like kind of working through a scenario together, or whether it's making silly noises, these are the kinds of ones that really, and I hate this phrase, but they really break the ice and make the whole thing flow a lot more freely, possibly permanently. So we could talk about some of those later. Do you want to know number 2?
Go on then.
Glom.
Great
Glom
name.
is, well, so when I made this game up, I thought glom was a nonsense word. Turns out it's not. Glom is a real word. But the rules of the game are you have to come up with a one-syllable nonsense word as quick as you can, going round the circle. If it's a real word, you're out. And it sounds really easy, but it's ridiculously hard. Do you want to have a go?
I mean, I'm looking around at words around me right now, frantically looking for a bit that doesn't make any sense, like Dio.
That's like 1.5 syllables, but we'll allow it.
Oh, sorry, yes.
That's your first move. From now on, we're going to do quick fire. Shug.
Et.
Flidge.
So it's just tickled me.
Oh, now is that a word or a noise? Yes, it's fine. Let's allow it, but try and use more consonants next time. Grith.
Ack.
Plin.
I struggle with these so terribly.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, what I love about it is you're being forced to be wrong.
Yes.
And we talked about losing earlier. The idea of being wrong, but being rewarded for being wrong, and if you're right, then you lose. It's like, what is this? So, yeah, flipping your brain over and forcing you to be wrong. That's why that's in number 2.
I definitely should not be surrounded by words right now. That's such a terrible way to freeze yourself.
Yes. Okay. Real words as well. How dare they?
Yeah, I know. Awful. Very good. Yeah, I like that. Glom, that is.
Glom. Yeah. Do you want number 1?
Go on.
Number 1 is switch. A bit like Fibber, you're telling stories. You will give a player a story. You could do the plot of Star Wars or Goldilocks and the Three Bears. One of those two major franchises, or other major franchises would do too. And they start to tell that story. If there's many of you playing, then everyone has one switch. If there's just a couple of you playing, you've all got a few switches. The way a switch works is at the end of a sentence, or sort of as the storyteller's coming to the end of one of their sentences, you shout switch, and they have to say that sentence again, but the opposite. So, for example, if they say, Goldilocks looked through the window and saw that nobody was home, and you shouted "switch." Then they'd say Goldilocks looked through the window and noticed the three bears were home, and they chased her out, and then the story starts moving in a new direction.
Oh, that's very good.
So you start off with a story, within a minute you're telling a totally new story. It's improvisational. If you're telling that story and people start switching you, it's really, really panic-inducing, but it's a wonderfully freeing experience. And then the other major rule is whatever happens at the end of the story, you have to applaud and say it was fantastic and say they coped really well with it, because there's nothing worse than, because no matter how good your story is, in your head as you're telling it, you're thinking, this is awful, this is embarrassing, everyone hates me, they're going to hang up on me. So as soon as the story ends, rousing, huge cheering and applause, and then when you play it again, you begin to develop vindictive or helpful qualities based on when people switched you and how mean they were with their switches. So it develops over time as well.
Yeah, that's great. I like the idea there of all of these sound like games you want to play several times, don't they?
Yeah.
And become staples. So obviously there we're talking about games we can play over Zoom, but there are games in your book that you can't play over Zoom.
No.
And you can't play remotely at all. Do you want to give us a few examples of those?
Yeah, sure. So in the new in board games, I've divided the. See, that's the intended reaction. It's kind of like confusion and hilarity. I have divided the book up into 3 main chapters, which is games you play on your feet, games you play with your hands, games you play in your head. And then within that, I also have single player, 2-player, and multiplayer. So through those sections, you can find different things you can do, and 2 games spring to mind of things that you need to be outside, you need to be moving around to do. One of which I'll talk about in a second. The other of which we developed last year. My fiance and I cycled across America. We got bored. We wanted to live a life that was led by play. We decided the best thing to do was to quit our jobs, fly to America, jump on bikes, and cycle. And in many ways, it was great, but in other ways, it was a massive exercise in dealing with anxiety, coping with the unknown, and finding play in situations that were anything but playful. And one of these was that we were camping outside a Walmart. And the rules of Walmart are that if you're homeless and have a camper van or an RV, that's fine. You can camp there for as long as you want because you're in a car, and the Americans love cars. If you're in a tent and arrived on bicycles, you will be moved on by the police and potentially arrested. So knowing this, we had to keep ourselves busy and not worried. There was nowhere else to camp. This was we entered this city. It was truly terrifying. Anyone's from Rawlins, Wyoming. Hey, I camped outside your Walmart. And we were scared and hiding and thinking of something to do. So one of us went inside the shop with a rubber duck that we just happened to have traded with a small child. We didn't trade it for a small child. We traded it with a small child for some candies a few days before. We had a very strange time. We had a rubber duck, and I went into Walmart and hid the rubber duck I think I hid it in a toy bus, actually. And then I wrote down a riddle and texted it to my fiance. And the riddle was something about I think his name was Lieutenant Mallard. Lieutenant Mallard's commuting route. And I included some different things, but clues about the aisle he was on his commuting route. And I said he was almost there, but he was stuck in traffic, something like that. And then I left Walmart, and Amy had to go in and find Lieutenant Mallard without being accused of shoplifting. And then take Lieutenant Mallard and leave and bring him back heroically. And then she would go and hide it again. So this became a very popular game. We enjoyed this very much. And we've played it plenty of times since. Not so good to play when there's queues outside Sainsbury's, but when there aren't queues, get yourself a rubber duck or any rubber animal, really. Go inside a shop, hide it, leave a clue, text that clue to your friend, and they can go in and search for it. Now, you can play this while you're shopping. If one of you's got the trolley and is going around collecting different cheeses, the other one can be finding Lieutenant Mallard. So it's a game to play in a shop when all seems lost. You can find play in almost any situation.
That's very good. I like that a lot. That's, yes, I like the idea there you're giving someone else a mission as well. I like that element of it.
Little secret mission. You're sort of watching out for the shelf stackers because they might think you're stealing all their rubber ducks.
Yes.
It's fun.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Did you ever get caught on that one?
Well, no, but we did get the police called on us, probably because we kept entering and leaving Walmart noticed. The police moved us on, We then argued with the police. I say argued. We talked in a friendly way. Turns out the policeman was a cycle tourist himself. He took us back into the shop and stood between us, and we had a chat with the manager who, for about half an hour, said we had to leave, and then eventually agreed that if we bought a luxurious breakfast from their bakery aisle at 5 a.m. and left by 5:10, when the other duty manager would relieve him from his post, we were gone by that point. He wouldn't tell anyone, neither would we. And we high-fived the policeman and he went away. Wow. And we did camp outside that Walmart, I'll be happy to tell you.
Wow, that's excellent. You said you had another.
Yeah, I love this. This is inspired by the situationist movement of the 1960s. Guy Debord was a sort of philosopher and a sort of political thinker. But one of his best things was his writing about a person's movement and exploration through an urban space. That sounds really haughty. Here's how you play. And this is a paraphrasing, a para rule from his way. He said, wander around a city, going where your feet take you, and find what you want to find. I've done it slightly differently. This game is, well, you call it a Derry Bay, which means adrift. You find a friend or arrange to meet one, and you roll a dice and flip a coin. And the dice will tell you, so the coin will tell you if you're going left or right. Tails is left, heads is right. Or the other way around. You just decide beforehand. And the dice number tells you which left or which right. So you roll a 4 in a heads, it's 4th right. You roll a 3 in a tails, it's 3rd left. Then you walk in whichever direction you start off walking. And when you hit the 4th right, you turn. And before you walk any further, you roll and flip a coin again. And then you keep on walking. So the idea of this is that you're being led by a completely random roll of a dice and flip of a coin in a city that you know, but exploring it in a way you don't. So when I played this with friends, we've done it as a pub crawl. Every pub you pass, you go in, you flip a coin, you decide what you're going to drink based on the flip of a coin or the roll of a dice, and then you leave slightly more rattled and you keep on going. And that was all very good until about 11:30. We were on the South Bank, all the pubs closed, and we had to go 5th left, but we were walking east on the South Bank, which meant the 5th bridge left. So we were walking for miles and miles and miles. Eventually crossed over and started, and it was raining heavily. We ended up 3:30 in the morning walking in circles around a Clapham housing estate. Ended up in an Asda, and again rolled a dice to find what we buy. Found a random aisle. On that random, found a random number of paces. Bought ourselves a birthday cake with a surprise inside. Sat out on a bench outside Asda. I don't know why all my stories involve supermarkets. With 2 plastic spoons and a large birthday cake. Sharing this thing, and it was a magical experience. And every time you play this game, you'll have a different experience. It won't always end in cake, but when it does, that's a great experience.
I mean, so the nice thing about all these is that the thing that draws them together for me, I think, and quite a lot of the Zoom games as well, is that you're by playing these games, you're actually creating like a shared world with other people. You're creating these stories between you, which I think is a reason a lot of people play games anyway. They want those sort of narrative moments that they remember, those vaguely cinematic moments in play, and also I guess in your version just in life, because you've ended up in that Asda. I think that's an interesting benefit to these games, and
Yes.
probably something that aids with the idea that there are people who don't live in board gaming families, but want to maybe turn their family a little bit more board gamey.
Yeah, that shared world is so important, because once you're all inside it, you feel safe and you feel challenged and you feel like you're somewhere totally different, and that's an escape. That's why we play, isn't it? We play to escape, I think. So it's massively important.
Do you want to take us through your book a little bit further? Because you had single player games in there.
Yes.
2-player games. And what was the third category?
So single player, 2-player, and multiplayer. And I think it's really interesting how, as you divide these up, you find yourselves in different kind of realms. So, multiplayer on your feet feel like party games, or they feel like adventurous games you play outside. Two-player on paper, or two-player with your hands, end up feeling like paper games, grid-based games, or mathematical games, or drawing games that are very close and sort of quiet, I think, and quite meditative sometimes. Single-player in your head games end up being more like challenges or secret missions, things that you could do to make your day feel more colourful. The kind of thing where you decide at the beginning of the day an artist, and then you try and fit song titles from that artist into your conversations throughout the day. No one else has to know about that game, but at the end of the day, you can decide how well you've done. So while the first book, The Floor is Lava, just had 10 flat situations where you would play: Christmas, vacations, bedtime, dinner table, car journeys. This one's more about finding correlations between games and making them feel surrounded by similar ones. I think that if we can use context as the ingredient for a game, then that's how we begin to find ways to play in the entirety of our life. So if you're stuck at home becomes like not only the play space, but also the ingredients for it. You can find games that involve hiding things in your house or using your knowledge of the house to do something. Context is massive, because while we talked about escaping, also games and play tends to be about coping with where we are or making fun out of where we are. So contextual elements is definitely something I've been trying to bring out in this. That's one theme. The other theme I think is about the sharing and trading of games as a kind of cultural currency or capital. The idea that there is inherent value in sharing play, and not even necessarily just the play, but sharing ideas of play, sharing imagination about play, is something that I've really, really been quite excited about. So very often before I tell you the rules of a game in this book, I will kind of say, oh, this is inspired by X, or I played this Y, and just sort of show you the heritage or the kind of taxonomy of where this game came from. Because with folk games, more so than almost any other type of game I can think of, the rules will shift and change with each new recipient of those rules.
Yeah, that's a really nice piece of the sort of world building element that we talked about earlier. That you're going to be creating these experiences, and then also just by giving people these games. When you say giving people these games, you've given the listeners to this podcast these games already just by talking about them. In some ways, you're giving away your book, which is very, very gracious of you.
The idea that you're giving someone the game. I mean, you give them the game by telling them the rules, and somehow that creates a little bubble in their head that means they now have that game. I mean, with a folk game, no one owns these things. Some of them were created by somebody, but the whole idea is they need to be shared. Something quite magical about that. I tell you the rules of a game, and suddenly you have that game in your head. And it's like a folk song, isn't it? There's a standard, or like a jazz. There's a standard, or Bonnie Prince Charlie. But every time someone plays it, they play a different version of that thing. So no one owns it. It's just a kind of collaborative Wittgensteinian kind of collective game.
And it spreads as well in a very nice organic way.
Definitely.
You often you have the sort of forever DM, person in the group, or the person who's always hosting these evenings, and these games are things where just playing it once will probably let it spread out to that person will take it home with them, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah. There are very few. There's only one game. I mean, I've put games like Mafia, which I think, or some people call it Werewolf. That's in The Floor is Lava, and that's one where if you want to DM that game and you're good at it, you'll be a forever DM. Similar to any tabletop game. If you're good enough at DMing, you'll never be allowed to do anything else. But the majority of the games are kind of, if someone is a judge or if someone is, the master, that shifts after one round. So it's really nice that we can switch roles, and it feels a lot more fluid than some of the games that we tend to play.
So when can we get them?
So The Floor is Lava is out in paperback, and it has been for a year or so. And it's out in Germany this year as well. It's out in Spain and the USA. Der Boden ist Lava is my new German. I don't know if I pronounced it right. Board game. Oh, sorry, I said it wrong. Board games is out on the 25th of June, 2020. That's this year, I gather. And who knows what the shops will be doing at that point, but it will be available online. And I'm very excited about getting people's reactions to it.
Great. And where can we find you online?
I am often found on Twitter at Ivan Brett. I have an Instagram, but I tend not to use it. And my website is a great big trove of different things, including a day-by-day journal of my 6 months across America. And there's going to be some new stuff going up there as well in the next couple of months about my new children's book / children's game book project. That's all ivanbrett.com.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening. Our theme music is by Body in the Thames, which you can find at bodyinthethames.bandcamp.com. You can find us on tabletopgaming.co.uk and follow us on Twitter at tabletopmag, on Facebook at Tabletop Gaming Magazine, on Instagram at tabletop_gaming_magazine, and we've just launched a Twitch channel. You can find us there on twitch.tv/Tabletop Gaming Mag. If you like the show, recommend it to a friend, rate us in the iTunes Store, or subscribe to the magazine, which you can do on our website.